Yo, welcome back to the show. Today's conversation is so important. I sat down with Ashley Armstrong, one half of the Strong Sistas. And the first half of the conversation really centers around her incredible insights on healing, metabolism, how to eat for optimal energy. And in the second half of the conversation, we transition into her journey into becoming a farmer at Angel Acres and what they are doing with Nourish Cooperative, where they're trying to put the best, healthiest food on your plate. But what we really talk about is the state of big food as it is right now. Is USDA Organic a scam? What is the problem with the centralized food system? Why it's so important to vote with your dollar and support small farmers. We talk about what it was like for them to be raided by the FDA and have $90,000 of healthy, organic, raw produce thrown in the trash because of quote unquote regulations. We talk about the current fever around the bird flu, hundreds of millions of birds slaughtered in the name of health and safety, and how those problems probably wouldn't even exist if we were just doing farming the way that farming could be. This is a big, exciting, fun, important conversation. You're going to love it. Let's get into it with Ashley Armstrong. Ashley Armstrong, what's happening? One half of the Strong Sistas is joining us today. I've been following you guys for quite a while, and it's been really cool to see. We were talking off air about a lot of shared kind of like life goals and homesteading, farming, and you guys have just dove in head first. But you've got quite a journey to arrive at this point where now what you're doing with Nourish and Angel Acres. And it all started or it seemed to start with the health thing. I'd love you to give me a bit of a backstory on the health journey, because it seems like you went down a pipeline that a lot of us are familiar with here. Keto, carnivore, eating, and now I'm curious where you've arrived at and what you've learned along the way. So do with that what you will, and tell us a little bit about who Ashley is these days in the health sphere as a Strong Sister.
Yeah. Hey, thank you so much for having me on. It's funny that there's so many people that go through a very similar journey. And when you take a step back, it's actually wild that we all have to go through this journey to find what is
Yeah.
healthy. Like, how have we lost touch with what to eat so much, right?
Right.
If you go back, so one thing that I'm just like fascinated with, one of my hobbies, habits, I love reading old fashioned cookbooks, old
Mm-hmm.
fashioned journals, like 1800s. There was no question of like what is good or bad. Like good and bad food lists didn't exist because they just were so much more connected to their food and also connected to tradition.
Yeah.
And I think that that is those two things right there. I think about these things a lot while I'm out doing farm tours. I actually don't really like listening to a ton of music or podcasts when I'm doing farm tours. I like to like listen to, outdoors and also
Mm.
give myself time to think. But I'm a weirdo like that. So I think one of the two reasons why everyone is so confused on what to eat these days is because one, we're completely disconnected from how our food is made,
Yeah.
right? Just modern food system, quick, convenient, junk food, processed food. There's absolutely no concept of where that came from. Oh, I get my food from the grocery store. I have no idea what happens before the grocery store. So that's one reason. And then I really think a second reason is we just lost complete touch with traditional cooking methods.
Right.
So if you look at other traditions, cultures throughout the world, you learn from your mom learns from her mom learns from her mom, and it's just passed down from generation to generation of like, hey, this is what our family prepares for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Here's what we eat on holidays. This is time tested traditional recipes that have been passed down from one generation to the next. We do not have that today, so of course we're confused because we're not introduced to these like ancestral traditional cooking
Mm-hmm.
preparations and recipes at a young age. And so then we're exposed to the wild west of social media where everywhere you turn you're getting whiplash of conflicting nutritional advice, right?
Yep.
We're in such a bizarre time. And if you go, it's almost like comforting to go back to the 1800s when you read these journals. It's a lot less fear mongering. It's a lot more just matter of fact because they didn't have any other options, right? And wow, how different all of our lives would be if we kind of didn't have all of these options and instead our
Mm.
only option was like real food.
Mm.
And that, I think, that realization for me was one of the most like freeing and inspiring and empowering things. Because when you just go back to like what our great grandparents, what our great great grandparents were eating, it's
Yeah.
just less of a fear based mindset and more of an empowering mindset.
Yeah.
So you asked like, where is Ashley today? I am all about empowerment as opposed to food fear. I've gone down a lot of food fearing pasts and dietary restriction things in the past, and instead I am all about someone understanding their metabolism, their health, and empowering them to make decisions based on what makes them feel good, what improves their health, and like what real food is.
Yeah.
So I think there's a huge difference in health outcomes based on someone's mindset on how they view things. And that's kind of one thing that I'm really passionate about is connecting everyone back to, more traditional ancestral food preparations, how things used to be consumed, how things used to be prepared, and just like what real food is. So then that way we just aren't even considering ultra processed foods. Like it's just not even a food, right?
Yeah.
It shouldn't be ultra processed foods. It should be ultra processed junk or ultra processed packages, right?
Right.
So like we have food and then we have like modern processed stuff. They're just not even, they shouldn't even be on the same thing because
Yeah.
then just not even question. So yeah, that's a long-winded way of saying kind of where I'm at today with food. I think that humans are omnivores
Mm.
and we get unique nutrients from animal products and we get unique nutrients from plant products. And I think that there is a spectrum on that where people can thrive, right? I'm not here to tell someone that this exact macronutrient split is going to work exactly for you. However, I do think that including carbohydrates is beneficial because
Yeah.
you get more minerals, you get more diverse phytochemicals, phytonutrients, and a unique set of nutrients. And then animal products, you're going to get fat soluble vitamins, great source of B vitamins, and including both can help you hit the RDA
Yeah.
because at the end of the day, another consistent trend with our ancestors is like supplements didn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
They got their they got their nutrients from real food. So how can we hit all of our micronutrient targets, our energy needs through real food and not rely on a bunch of synthetic supplements?
Yeah.
Now, of course, like Heart and Soil, that is like literally a real food put into a capsule. So it's a different story because it's the whole food matrix. There's something unique about the whole food matrix. There are plenty of studies documenting this for a number of different nutrients. For example, like calcium supplementation doesn't have the same impact as consuming calcium in the whole food
Right.
dairy form. So how can we meet all of our micronutrient and energy needs through whole foods? And I think that that's being an omnivore, including
Yeah.
plant products and animal products that work for you, that you enjoy, and that you digest well.
Yeah. Yeah. There's definitely something about like the entourage effect of the more whole, real, natural thing versus the isolated compound, right? As food wise. And also sunshine, right?
Yes.
Vitamin D can be
Yes.
great, but you know where the best vitamin D comes from? The sun.
Yes.
Like red light therapy, love it. But you know what's better than that? The sun.
Mm-hmm.
The natural thing is usually got the most wisdom. And I think it's a really refreshing frame, like you said, to just have this empowering lens of real food versus not really food, like
Yeah.
Franken food.
Yeah.
But what's very interesting is because we've gotten so lost, we have to relearn what real food is. And that's so ass backwards. That's that disconnect you were talking about. We're so disconnected that we're like, okay, well, is that a real food? Or what about this one and this one? I remember like way back in the day, I started with Mark Sisson's The Primal Blueprint. And I still think to this day, that guy's got such a well-rounded perspective on all things. He's lived a lot of life. He's been hugely successful. He's got this primal blueprint pyramid, but he said something that stuck with me. He's like, did it grow from the ground? Did it fall from a tree? Did it come from the ocean? Did it have eyes and a butthole? Eat those things. That's real food. And I was like, okay, well, that's pretty sticky. I can remember that. And then you get all these other adages like shop the perimeters, or ideally go and shake the hand of the people that feed you and connect with small farmers and things like that.
Yep.
But that's what we're here to do, is to continue to educate people and give them more empowering lenses of like real food creates health, and you can more naturally hit your broad spectrum micronutrients and macronutrients if you do that. restrictive lenses, scarcity-based lenses, not only are going to damage your mental health around food, which will damage your downstream physiology, but are just not that helpful. And you alluded to potentially having some of those. What are some of your like recovering food rules that you used to fear? Was it like all sugar will make you fat? Seed oils, obviously we know they're not good, but there is like a very big mental health component to food as well. So what are some of your recovering food addiction / aversion things?
Oh gosh, I've been through them all. Like that's one reason why I'm almost obsessed with sharing, right?
Yeah.
Strong Sistas, we've taken a brief pause on like generating content because we're doing so much with Nourish and you only have certain hours in the day. But I'm so passionate to share about these things because like I've been through all of these things with these fear-based mindsets, and being on the other side of not having those, it's so much better. Like life is so much better. It's so much more freeing and empowering.
Yeah.
So, the typical, oh my gosh, all sugar is going to make you fat. The second that you have sugar, instant fat. Fat is bad for you. So back in the days of just chicken breasts and broccoli and brown rice. What else? Oh, animal protein is going to clog your arteries and your colon. This is an interesting, and it could be a little controversial with what some of you guys believe. Starches are bad for you. Instantly raises your blood sugar, makes you fat. Grains are bad for you. I think that those have played a traditional role for a number of cultures throughout the world. If you look at all traditional cultures, there's some sort of base starch.
Yeah.
So like cassava, properly prepared grains. So of course they didn't have modern bread. Modern bread is like quickly risen by yeast, often includes like bromated flour fortified with iron and synthetic B vitamins, grown with glyphosate and pesticides. So like modern bread is very different, but like traditional fermented, soaked, sprouted grains they can play a useful role in someone's diet if it works well for their digestion. But I think that grains have played an important role in the last several generations. So if you kind of look at various cultures throughout the world, all their traditional cuisines have some sort of starch in them. And so learning that made me question, because sometimes when you go through this like pro-metabolic, like repeat line, you just think, okay, I can only eat like sucrose sources like honey, maple syrup, fruit. And I had that mindset too. But then I was like, I love sourdough bread. I love white rice. I love potatoes, and I do really well with them. Potatoes were a centerpiece for a number of cultures like throughout the world. And if you don't do well with them, you don't have to include them.
Yeah.
But changing your mindset of like, this can be a useful food for me, I think is really freeing, rather than like potatoes are bad because of oxalates. So that's one of the most freeing things that I have changed, because especially living in Michigan, we don't have watermelons growing.
Yeah.
But we can use starches all throughout the winter because those are storage grains, storage produce. Potatoes last a very long time when stored properly. Heritage grains, making sourdough bread, those last all throughout winter, right? So that was one big thing that I really changed my mindset on. I think that fruits and starches and grains can all play a useful carbohydrate role in someone's diet. What would be, saturated fats are bad for you, clog your arteries.
Of course. And
I think that that's like a pretty big spectrum, but I've been plant-based vegan. I've been full carnivore. I've been keto. I did fasting, repeat. And now I'm kind of like metabolically focused. So of course, focusing on, keeping metabolic rate up, optimizing metabolism, choosing real foods. And I love learning about traditional recipes and how our ancestors used to prepare food. So one thing that I think is fascinating is the process of nixtamalization, because a lot of people fear corn today. Well, modern corn, GMO doused in glyphosate, is very different than like the Aztecs and the Mayans 3,000, 5,000 years ago discovered this process called nixtamalization, where they would soak the corn kernels in a calcium-based solution like
Mm.
lime or wood ashes. And that reduces the anti-nutrients, improves vitamin B3 availability, reduces the, like, it helps improve the digestion of the starches in the corn. 3,000 years ago. Nixtamalization, it creates masa harina, which then they made traditional corn tortillas. Like, learning about those things are so fun for me. And it
Yeah.
also increases the amount of like food that I can include in my diet and enjoy. Yeah. That
Well, firstly, I want to give you props on saying nixtamal because I can never say that thing, but it's so good.
nixtamalization.
Nixtamalization. So good
Yeah.
job. Yeah, I learned about that. It's kind of in line with this ancestral preparation methods of certain foods. Like they could become radically different depending on not just the quality and the sourcing of the grain, for example, but how it's fermented versus not, etc.
Yeah.
And I love what you said. And you mentioned three of my homies, which is white rice, potatoes, and bread. I mean, I'm English, so like potatoes is the food of my people, you know. But I went through that phase too. Like, you know, all carbs are bad essentially. And the starchier it is, the worse off it will be because it's going to, I don't know, spike insulin for longer or endotoxin but you get to a certain point where you realize that if you've mostly built your diet for a sustained period of time at least, and maybe this is why so many of us end up with extreme elimination diets like carnivore, because we have to remove a lot of stuff to get to a point where we can begin the healing again. But ideally, I don't think the goal is to stay there. The goal is to be as abundant and inclusive of foods that don't damage our metabolic health in the process. And a byproduct of getting healthy is also resilience, so that a potato doesn't absolutely wreck you. You know, what a wild thing to think about. Like, potatoes probably shouldn't destroy your digestion or cause you to get super fluffy and puffy and bloated. And if they do, then it doesn't mean you'll never eat a potato for the rest of your life. But what's the underlying healing that we need to do to get you to a point where you can eat real food? Because that is a real food. It is one of those. It comes from the ground, you know? So I think that's really empowering frame. And it's been very similar to my journey too. Lens of restriction, you know, have had the carnivore days. And now it's mostly just eat real food. Don't sweat the small stuff so much. Know the big hitters. Focus on having healthy mitochondria and metabolism and having a nice hot engine. And you can even survive some of the more quote unquote naughty foods or bad foods or however you want to frame that, because you are a resilient human too. So you mentioned pro-metabolic was one of the words you threw in there. And this is definitely, it's had its moments. It's having its moment again. In fact, you had an interview with Dr. Ray Peat towards the latter years of his life too. So you've learned a lot about this and you dove in head first. And now you said mostly focusing on real food and basically metabolic health. So what does metabolic health focused eating or living or the pro-metabolic lifestyle mean to you?
Honestly, it is very empowering to learn about metabolic health because it helps you have a better lens navigating through the nutrition space. If you don't understand base metabolism or physiology, you are going to get whiplash trying to navigate through social media because one person says one thing, one person says the other, and it's very top level, vague things. But if you have like a rooted base in understanding of like metabolic health is the number one thing, and as long as these decisions are improving my metabolic health, I'll be able to continue to move forward in improving my health. So essentially, like, what is metabolism? It's this bizarre concept, this term that gets, thrown around everywhere, and it's a buzzword, right? When someone says metabolism, they're like, "Oh, good," but what does it actually mean, right? And I think it's important to remember, there's a few purposes of eating. Vitamin P, vitamin pleasure. Food should be it should be enjoyment. Like, it is very advantageous to the survival of us that we enjoy the food that we're consuming so that we continue to eat, right? We need food. I also think it brings community together, but also we extract energy and nutrients from our food. So metabolism is this process of turning food into energy. It's like a energy currency exchange because food comes in through calories, technically like electrons, and your body has to do something to those to convert it into the energy currency that your cells use, which is ATP. And so metabolism is this very complex process of converting that into ATP, and we want that to be a quick, fast process, like water moving through a hose, no blocks or barriers, right? Just, coming in, generating ATP, coming in, generating ATP, a smooth process. Unfortunately, with, a lot of dietary restrictions, the modern world, plastics, glyphosate, there's a lot of breaks and barriers. So we may have some holes in our hose where water's flirting out, and we're seeing some damage, some DNA damage, oxidative stress, and it's not flowing through as quickly. So we're not generating as much ATP, and some people are in a low energy state. So essentially, pro-metabolic, improving your metabolic health, is removing as many of those breaks as you can so that we can more efficiently convert the food that we're consuming into energy. And of course, there are other things that are needed in that conversion process. You can't just sit at your desk and eat food all day and be like, all right, body, make energy. We need various cofactors, which are those vitamins and minerals, some of which we get through food, some of which we optimally get through the sun. We also need activity and movement, because the body needs to move to be able to remove waste from the body, from your lymph. Your digestion works better when you get some movement. Like, we are subject to gravity. And so if we're just sitting down hunched, of course, your body's going to be in a different position. Whereas if we're moving around, our organs and everything has kind of more space to flow. So it's a very freeing thing to think about, because if you have that kind of mindset, it's not as like a fear-based restrictive. And instead it's like, wow, I'm empowered to make the decisions to improve how my body produces energy. How amazing is that?
Yeah. And energy is the ultimate form of currency. Like, it's
exactly
everything, like you were saying before we got going, and we'll get to this at some point today in the conversation, but just like, I'm working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. Good luck doing that with no energy. You can't do it. But anything, you don't also just have to be a farmer, a business owner. Like, the energy that you have to pour into your relationships, to your work, to your children, to just surviving, because in a highly toxic world, like, it's exhausting. Then you add in politics and social media and stress and taxes and life stuff that you've got to do, and it's just like, ugh. So the one thing you can try to do is buffer up your energy availability and your conversion of energy, because with essentially an unlimited amount of energy, you can get anything done. And that's like one of the things that has been the most pivotal for me, and I wish I could instill it in everybody. As a dad of two, 35-year-old, busy, all of that stuff, but I feel like I have unlimited energy. I honestly feel like I can go all day long and just keep going. And a lot of that is lifestyle design, because the things that I do, as much as they are hard, like, fixing fences and stopping animals from dying and feeding things and keeping feral children alive and all of that stuff, it is a labor of love, and love can endure. But a huge, huge component of that is the physiological effects. Like, I'm fueling my body in a way that is incredibly nutritious, nose to tail, nutrient dense, not restricted in any one macronutrient, really. I'm guzzling raw milk like I identify as a baby cow, but I'm also living in alignment with the laws of nature. I'm grounding, I'm getting out in the sunlight, I'm moving my body. This morning I was doing jump rope to move the lymph, all of those things that you said. So super, super aligned, and couldn't agree more. Like, what everybody wants in life is more energy. And if we can get people to have more energy, they can transform their life in ways they couldn't understand,
And it's like you're filling up your cup. And so when your body has full energy reserves, that means that every organ system in the body has access to energy for it to perform its function. So at the end of the day, your body has like you said, it can pull from however much energy you give it. And if you have limited energy reserves, which many people do in the modern world, and it's hard to navigate out there. It is, right? So your weakest link is going to be impacted. So people talk about, I don't detox well. Well, your liver may not have all the energy it needs to perform its 500 plus tasks that it has to do. The more energy that your body has, the better it can perform those vital tasks. And one of Dr. Ray Peat's famous lines, he talks about the concept, like, in order for like a structure inside your body to keep itself well, it requires adequate energy. So like, maintaining structure requires energy, and then proper structure then yields proper function. And so it allows you to not identify with like a disease or that you're damaged or broken. And it's also very different than the conventional mainstream medicine, which isolates every part of your body into different doctor's offices, where like, okay, go to the heart specialist, go to the liver specialist. That's very compartmentalization, where it's viewing
Yeah.
humans almost like cars, where you can separate systems. No, the body is a whole organism and it's all interconnected. And so when you have this like metabolism focused, it's kind of like the rising tide lifts all boats. So
Hmm.
as you improve your energy production, systemic function across the body will improve as you increase your body's availability to access energy. So of course, your function of a certain organ system isn't going to be great if it doesn't have adequate access to energy. And so
Right.
again, it's very empowering, and it doesn't make you view yourself as like, I'm damaged, I'm broken. Hey, maybe I have low energy availability right now and I can improve. If I work on certain lifestyle or dietary aspects, I can increase my body's energy reserves. And then, hey, maybe that function outcome will improve.
Yeah. Beautiful. Exactly that. Yeah. So practically speaking, everybody wants this. How do we get there? So there are 101 things you can do, and I'm sure we could waffle all day about the intricacies, but maybe like sledgehammer level stuff. What are big rocks that you think people really need to be thinking about, diet, lifestyle, wherever you want to go with this, to really build a pro-metabolic high energy state internally?
Yeah, I honestly think one of the most empowering things someone can do is track their food on Chronometer for a
Hmm.
week. You don't have to track your macros every day. You really don't. But the food that you consume every single day plays the biggest lever in improving your health. And if you can just kind of better assess, how many calories, how much macros, am I hitting my RDAs? And you can kind of see that on Chronometer and kind of develop a little bit, collect some data, right? Because then you can start to make decisions based on data rather than just, oh, I'm
Yeah.
kind of like more subjective, right? So I would say that that's a really great place to start, is kind of assessing, hey, what's my food frequency? How much food am I consuming? Am I hitting RDAs, or am I like really missing vitamin
Yeah.
B3 or something like that? I think that's a great place to start. I also think that when you can, I know that this is very overwhelming for some people, but when you can, know where your food comes from, because then you can kind of better control what type of metabolic breaks you're avoiding, excess toxins, things like that. And so let's say that someone is buying all their food from Costco right now. Totally fine. Keep doing that. My challenge to you is to take one of those foods and instead source it from a local farmer or
Hmm.
something else. So, like, for example, buy your milk from a local farmer or someone online that delivers to you or something like that, or eggs or meat. Just choose one thing, find a source that you can feel confident in, and go there. So starting to better understand where your food is coming from, and limiting the amount of times that you go out to eat. I think that that's kind of on the unfortunate
Yeah.
reality of modern times, is like a lot of restaurants, fast food, processed food. It's really not setting you up for success. So the more that you can cook from home, the better. And I know that that's overwhelming for people, but it's just the reality of where the food system is right now.
Yeah.
Um, and then I think assessing your activity, you don't have to go crazy overboard. And I think that that's a thing that stops people, because they think, I have to work out every day.
Hmm.
Nope. Let's try to hit 8,000 steps a day. Can you do 8,000 steps a day, scattered walks throughout the day? Exercise, strength train one time a week. Doing those two things will move
Yeah.
your health forward so much. I strength train 3 times a week and I get like 8 to 10,000 steps a day. If someone can do that, amazing, right? But one strength training workout a week will make a big difference as well. I don't think you need to do 4, 5, 6, 7. I think that that can actually be too much.
Yeah.
So you don't have to do as much as what people think. And I think that that's freeing, because then you can actually start. Because sometimes limitations for people not to start is the fear of it taking too much time or not
Yeah.
being able to commit to it. So to summarize, track your food on Chronometer for a period of time to just learn. Start to know where your food is coming from and understand the sourcing a little bit. Limit the amount that you go out to eat and maintain some level of like baseline activity. And I think that those are 4 things that can really move the needle forward in someone's health. And
Hmm.
I have found that when people start to do the 8,000 steps a day, they kind of naturally start to get more sunlight. They
Yeah.
they realize, hey, in order to hit 8,000 steps a day, I got to go outside a few times a day. So then that kind of knocks two birds with one stone, right? So
Bingo.
then it's not as overwhelming. So those are four tips, I would say. But
Yeah.
what are your thoughts? Would you add a fifth there?
I actually, it's funny. I would say much of the same kind of things, and especially like your point on a few things in particular. And I think there are many double whammies in there. You know, like the not eating out because you don't want to. And there's, I mean, depends where you are, right? If you're in a cool, fun city like Austin, at least you can find some seed oil free restaurant options now that are focusing on local, organic, nose to tail. Like that's cool, but that's like the 1% of restaurants out there. Everywhere else is using crappy ingredients from Tyson or wherever else it's coming from, fried in seed oils. So it's not just about, you know, the quality of the food. It's also about limiting the really harmful things that are damaging your mitochondria. The more steps, the more sunlight is great. I think starting sensibly with something like a movement is actually the way to do it, because I agree, most people don't do it because it just seems too big.
Yeah.
The cool thing is if you start with one exercise session or you do one movement class or you find something that you like, you're naturally going to want to do more. But as if you try to say like, oh, I've got to work out every day, it's like a big like grind. But if you start doing it, you're like, wait a minute, that was fun. I feel amazing. It gave me more energy. Maybe I'll do two. And then maybe you arrive at a really balanced place where you're hitting 3, 4 a week and you get in your steps and now you're a vibrant human. And it
Set
wasn't like
yourself up for
forced on you.
success.
Yeah, simple. Right, like simple scales and fancy fails in our food systems, in our shopping systems. Like it's always about coming back to simplicity, which is kind of where you started, right? Like we don't even know what food is anymore. It's got too complicated because the whole thing is so complex. Simple is often the answer. And I think this is actually a lovely departure from thinking about food and what we eat to thinking about what we eats, and thinking about this point that you made about trying to slowly get off of big food and into these local communities, farmers markets, online services, like whatever you can do to more consciously choose to vote with your dollar and decide where you want your food to come from and what kind of systems you want to support. Now, I've got like a first-hand kind of deeper understanding and appreciation for where food come from over the last like 3 years of doing the homestead on my little land here. And that's not really selling. You know, I give some eggs to friends when we're drowning in eggs and things like that, but I'm not selling. I'm just really understanding the cycles of life and death, where food comes from, the impact of what animals eat on the quality of food and all of that stuff. So that was kind of where you went with it. It's like there is going to be more inputs and control over food in terms of what the animal's fed, and therefore what you eat is healthier, which is going to make you healthier. But I know you've got a whole host more to say about this because it's what you do now. You have Angel Acres, you have a co-op, Nourish, and you're actually trying to really get people thinking more about supporting small farmers and taking our power back over big food or big ag. When did you even get into this? Where did the idea come from to become farmers?
So honestly, I have Dr. Ray Peat to thank for this. Honestly, he is just such a humble human being and changed my life in so many ways. I learned about him and started reading his work when I was in graduate school, and I was headed down a path of becoming a professor in mechanical engineering. Not really enjoying what I was doing, honestly. Just kind of, I was good at it, and it was the path that I somehow got on from peer pressure and, thinking that the more degrees that I had, the better.
Right.
And I wasn't satisfied. And learning from Dr. Ray Peat about, polyunsaturated fatty acids, PUFAs, how previously our diet was, 1 to 2% of linoleic acid, omega-6, and we were eating much fats higher in saturated fat, and learning how, the inside of your body. Now, this is an overwhelming thought, and I don't think that people should make this like the forefront of how to change their life, but it is a fact. Like the types of fat that you are made up of, like the inside of your body, it doesn't just serve as energy. It doesn't just serve structural roles. It also serves as signaling roles.
Yeah.
So whether you have more saturated or more unsaturated fat in your body sends a different metabolic signal. So if you kind of think of like a squirrel wants to enter hibernation to last through the winter months. So in the fall, they really load up on nuts, which are high in unsaturated fats. That changes the fat composition inside of them because you are what you eat. And so that ratio, that signal of higher unsaturated fats to saturated fats sends a metabolic signal to the body. Hey, we need to slow the metabolic rate down. We're entering into hibernation. It's a beautiful thing that nature does, right? Unfortunately, I don't really want to hibernate as a human, right? And so we've seen these trends of higher unsaturated fat tissue composition increase. And this is something that I learned from Dr. Ray Peat. And when I saw that, I was like, wow, that's insane. Like, our food system has changed that much in the last 100 years that most of our food now has a different fatty acid ratio than what our ancestors were eating. Wow. So that is one main reason why focusing on real whole foods will improve your health, because you're going to ultimately be changing the types of fat inside of you. Whereas if you eat out a lot, you're eating a bunch of seed oils, you're eating a bunch of food that's higher in unsaturated fats, that's going to hold you back a little bit in the long run. Yeah. So learning about that was really empowering, and I became obsessed. I love fatty acids. I love how the ratio of saturated to unsaturated fats, how that sends a different metabolic signal. Like, it's so fun for me to learn about this. And then how empowering it is that I can change the types of fats in the food that I produce to sell to people.
Yeah.
Wow. So that's kind of my nature. When I learn about something like that I'm obsessed with, empowered, just full speed ahead. So that's kind of where we started the farm, because I realized, hey, when you change what a chicken is eating, you can change the types of fat in the egg. And I actually got fatty acid testing done. And I showed, hey, we can lower the linoleic acid omega-6 by 76% in our eggs. Wow. Because we've changed what the chicken is eating. And this is where, we're in a unique position right now, because as a consumer, this is very overwhelming. Like, I just want to eat real food. And so I kind of feel a duty of, like, I want to provide a resource, a co-op, a shopping experience where someone can shop with confidence, and we can shop like it was 1890. Let's go backwards in time and produce food the way it used to be done before industrial agriculture, which started, around the world wars, around that time era, when corn and soy and monocropping, confinement operations, stuffing animals into buildings all started. So there's multiple levels to this story. And I never like to overwhelm someone, because at the end of the day, choosing real whole foods is like step one, and you're going to move yourself forward so much. But I've kind of like felt a personal responsibility to try to change the food system. Yeah. And I have a lot of experience now on like how we can change the types of fats and the food quality based on how the food is produced. So that's what we're working on implementing behind the scenes with Nourish and Angel Acres. And, we're only a few years in, and it's a lot of work, but I feel so empowered to be connected, and I feel so blessed to have this opportunity. But my goal is to be able to provide like a shopping experience where someone can shop with confidence, and we're producing food way back in the day. And there are farmers doing this all over. And that's why if you choose one of your food items and source that from, a local farmer's market or something you can shop online, if you're one of our Nourish Food Club or Angel Acres Egg Club customers, amazing. Thank you guys. But it's how, when you make that vote with your dollar, that means that dollar isn't going towards the conventional food system. That's and right. I know that everyone is so excited about the new administration and MAHA. Unfortunately, the new head of the USDA is an advocate for big ag. I don't know how many changes we're actually going to see in the food system. I don't think it's going to come from top down. Big ag, big food spend so much money lobbying, like so much money. And that's why conventional food is so cheap. Yeah. Taxpayers' money is going towards government subsidies, which are making corn and soy and all of this conventional confinement operation seem like it costs less, but you're actually paying for it in other ways. And it has hidden costs that we aren't seeing. So I think it really is going to come bottom up, the change. And I know that it's more expensive. I know that it's overwhelming. When you can, when you have the resources, when you have the mental space to make these changes, you doing that, you are a part of the change. And that is empowering
Yeah.
because you're helping create a better food system for generations to come. I think I got off track your question a little bit, but
No, it's such a huge, this is such a huge topic, this one.
yeah,
It's massive. It's everything. It's essentially the future of food.
yeah,
And you said the word overwhelming a couple of times because it is. And I struggle to straddle these lines sometimes of like, the just eat real food principle. And then understanding that we've broken food so much that even eating quote unquote real food, like Costco bought chicken, is now so unnaturally high in linoleic acid because of what they're fed and what they're pumped full of. It's like, oh yes, there's still a health consequence there. I've seen you say in the past, like something like, look, if you care about linoleic acid and you're trying to avoid seed oils, then why are you eating conventionally raised chicken? Because the linoleic acid content is so high, right? So it's exhausting. And I think for those people that can, for the people that are in positions to vote with their dollar,
yep,
it's imperative that we do, because if we don't, then big food wins and big ag wins. And you said there's a lot of hidden costs that we don't realize we're fronting. I'll tell you one, it's with our health.
yeah,
It's with the sickness that we've got right now. It's with the future of our children, the future of our soils, the future of food. Like that's the biggest hidden cost that we're going to have to foot the bill for one day if we cannot wake up and grow up and start to, for the people that are in a position to vote with our dollars, support systems like yours, or just like educate yourself so you can start to make more conscious decisions around not just the way food is like delivered on your plate, but the way it's raised.
yeah. And this is the most frustrating thing to me because you see all these really wealthy celebrity people like making the worst food choices, and
Yeah.
they have the resources, they have the money. And like you were saying, it is imperative if you do have the resources to be able to do it, please do, because guess what? Farming this way is not cheap.
No.
I know firsthand, you know firsthand, your farmer needs that money. It None of us go into food to make high dollar. The profit margins in food is slim, and that is why big food is pushing this other system, because when they have this centralized system, they have control of so many factors throughout the food system. They can cut costs whenever they need to, and unfortunately in smaller scale regenerative food systems, it just costs more.
Yep.
It's just a matter of fact, because corners aren't cut. Takes more time to finish animals, and the more that you can support those type of things, that means that those farmers can afford to pay their monthly bills, they can afford to keep the lights on, and they can afford to keep going. So like, if someone has the resources and the opportunity to do so, it's imperative that you support these farmers as often as possible, so then that way these options remain here. Because at a certain point, as a farmer, you can't keep paying for $10. You can't keep losing money month after month.
Yeah.
And a lot of farmers start that way because startup costs are high. But at a certain point, you have to become profitable in order to be in this 5, 10, 15, 100 years from now.
Yes. Yeah, and it's it's kind of frustrating on a small scale for myself, who's just trying to feed his family essentially, and maybe a couple of friends if we do really good. But even just more recently, I've got like 10-week-old piglets right now and been online trying to figure out a corn and soy free feed situation. And you go into groups and you have to ask for help in this world because nobody's necessarily wrote the book. There are some amazing farmers out there doing it right, and we can learn a lot from them, the Joel Salatins of the world and such. But what I was surprised to see was the resistance to even asking questions like, do you guys do corn and soy free pigs? Because in some of these old school ways of farming, you get shut down. People are like, oh, this again, this is just hippy dippy. This is not how you raise pigs. I've been doing it for 50 years, because they're trapped in the system, right? They're like, they don't understand maybe the nutritional consequences of
Yeah.
fattening a pig up 6 months quicker than it would take to do it naturally. But then you are what you eat. So it's like, it's got so many different unique layers to it. Not just the fact that it's a conglomerate monster, like a hydra where you cut off one head and it seems to grow back too. But even at the root level, and some of the local farmers, they don't understand the health complications. They're not going to pay 2x to get a pig to a slaughter weight, because why would they? It doesn't make any sense to them, right? So it's like, man, we just need to keep having these conversations, and we need like the citizen scientists of the world that care about this stuff to keep supporting with their dollar the systems that they want to breathe life into.
Yeah, it's definitely difficult because another reason why I appreciate Dr. Ray Peat's work so much is, he saw the literature and he saw the food system kind of before industrial agriculture, before big pharma. And he experienced the huge shift of,
Mm-hmm.
oh, saturated fats are bad for us. Oh, PUFAs and vegetable oils are heart healthy. Like, he was there before that message kind of started.
Yeah.
And then he saw the shift. And that has impacted so many things. It's impacted what the government subsidizes for food production. Billions of dollars go towards, supporting this idea that saturated fats are bad for us. That impacts US dietary guidelines.
Yeah.
It impacts what livestock are eating. If you go through the literature, and this is what, one thing I learned from graduate school is, reading through the literature and reading through research studies. If you go through the literature, you just see, you want to hit your head on the wall, because every intro line of these livestock, research groups says, like, because saturated fats are unhealthy and polyunsaturated fats are heart healthy, we need to increase PUFAs in our food system and decrease saturated fats. So now you have research, like, literally millions of dollars are being spent towards research on manipulating the fatty acid composition of milk. I just produced a YouTube video on our Nourish Food Club YouTube channel, and I dive into this. They are manipulating our milk. So they are trying to decrease the amount of saturated fat and increase the amount of polyunsaturated fat because of this lie, this false belief that wasn't there 100 years ago.
Yeah.
It's profitable for big food. It's profitable for big pharma. It's profitable for big ag. And so it perpetuates, like, so many layers of our food system. And it's really difficult because now, like you said, like, we've unleashed a beast. How do we right. How do we bring it all back in? Because it's impacted so many, it's impacted, what's included in processed food. It's in, like, oils and things like that. It's included what the government says is good or bad. And it impacts research. It impacts what people are spending money on in improving health. It impacts what livestock are eating. It's a very complex problem.
It's huge. It's huge. And it is like a David and Goliath kind of story. And when you're up against it, and I know you know this well, because I know you've had run-ins with the 3-letter agencies, right? Like, as a small farmer that's putting all this love, attention, and care into these animals and raising them the right way, to have an agency storm your property and essentially throw away thousands of dollars of product. Tell me what happened there. That must have been crazy.
Yeah. This is a good thought experiment for someone. Think back. Did your great grandparents, did they have to listen? Like, did the government tell them what was good or bad for them? Or did they just go and buy from a farmer and, they'd buy from someone that their food made them feel good, it tasted good? Like, they had free market when it comes to choosing where their food comes from. How did we get to this place where the government views it's their duty to tell us what's good or bad for us? When did that start? And it's fascinating to look at, like, okay, this state implemented, like, the food laws in 2000 and something. It's kind of recent, right? And so again, these, like, belief systems, whether or not they're actually healthy for us, they perpetuate so many layers because they impact regulations, which impact small food producers. Regulations can be cost prohibitive. They can put you out of business. They can also extremely limit what you can produce and what you can't produce, which ultimately impacts the health quality of the final product. So, at Nourish Food Club, Nourish Cooperative, we're selling raw dairy for pets because your pets deserve the highest quality food that you can imagine. And the state of Michigan told us that it is illegal to sell raw dairy for pets. Meanwhile, I can go to hundreds of pet food stores throughout the state of Michigan and buy raw goat milk for my dog.
Yeah.
But I can't. So we received over $90,000 of our raw dairy products were thrown in the dumpster. And if we did not receive donations, we would have gone out of business instantly. As a new startup food business, how could someone afford to lose $90,000 worth of product?
No, you can't.
And so we were very fortunate to have received donations from our food club members and helped us, stay afloat during that time. And these regulations definitely are in the best interest of a centralized food system, because then a few hands have control of the input costs, the final prices, and that's very profitable for very large food industries.
Yeah.
You look at how our food system is organized. There's something called the CR4, which essentially analyzes the total percentage of the market that the top 4 industries have. So, people say that the CR4 should be below 50%. Well, some even say below 30%, because that shows, free market.
Right.
Unfortunately, a lot of our food is like 60 to 90%. The CR4 is 60 to 90%, wow, which means that 4 firms control most of the food produced in our country. That is not how it should be. And so a lot of these regulations, they spend millions of dollars lobbying to ensure that they get put in place. So another example is this whole thing called Proposition 12, Prop 12. And it is this law passed in California in 2023, which provides standards and requirements for living space for livestock. So egg layers have to have a certain amount of space. Cows have to have a certain amount of space. Pigs have to have a certain amount of space. You would think okay, that's pretty good. However, Prop 12 is in California, and it limits anything that comes into California. So that means that this impacts food producers throughout the country. This also means, hey, you can't be an extreme cage confinement operation and sell food here. That is more expensive for various things. And so the new USDA head has said we should get rid of Prop 12, because that is not in the favor of big ag. So again, there's so much politics. There's so much money spent on lobbyists to keep business as usual.
Yeah.
So how do you navigate all of this as a food producer? It's wild, wild west. I'm not going to lie. It's overwhelming. It's scary. It's daunting, and just trying to do the best we can. And I know that small farmers throughout the country feel this pain.
Yeah.
We, a local butcher around us, he's amazing. He does a really great job. He's got a great setup, great space. But I tried to get him to have the USDA inspection done in 2023. It is March 2025, and they still haven't signed his papers. So there are huge barriers that make this whole So going back to what I was talking about, these government regulations of being their duty to regulate the food that we consume, they just make it really hard for small farmers. And those used to not be there, but they're there to keep business as usual, centralized food system. And so again, the more that you can support other small farmers not in this centralized food system, the more access everyone will have, because then this other system will have more resources, will have more money to be able to expand and offer things at better prices, at more of a variety and things like that.
And I think you just summed up really well why this won't be a top-down system change. It's going to be a grassroots movement. It's going to be co-ops and farms like yours and spreading this knowledge. And it was actually really beautiful to see, in the wake of the tragedy of them throwing away almost $100,000 of real nutritious food, that at least people were so kind of galvanized by that they could keep you in business. So it's not like, that's what it's the mafia. That's what these criminals do. They stomp on you because you are a threat to the system, which they control and they have a monopoly over. But the people still do have power, and we can do it. And the more we support these systems, the more that they will grow. And, maybe, and you've got to hope that maybe we can get back to something that looks more like that in the future, or at least for the crazy folks like us that care about that, right? And that care about the future itself. But it's so shady to me how so much of it is not only built on the lies, like you said, the lies that if you have any kind of intellectual rigor or just common sense that you investigate these ideas like, oh, saturated fat bad, seed oil good, you blow it and it topples over like a house of cards. So it's built on this, and then it's propositioned to the rest of us, the people of the earth, in the name of health and safety. And it's all used to just control food. Like right now there's all this scare tactics and fear mongering around bird flu, and elimination of giant amounts of flocks and driving up the egg prices. Like, as a small farmer, what's your take on this whole latest and greatest?
I think that Joel Salatin had a great way of explaining this, because, the same thing happened with COVID a few years ago. You saw like a decimation of the supply chain.
Yeah.
That literally screams, it screams, a centralized food system doesn't work. It doesn't work because the supply chain's not resilient.
Yeah.
And also, I'm sorry. Okay. Thought experiment for the audience, right? Now imagine if you and 50,000 of your closest friends, as if we all have 50,000 friends. But imagine if all of you guys went into a building and there was no doors to go outside, there's no sunlight, and you're all drinking water with antibiotics all day. Now imagine if one person in there got sick. Would you all get sick? When you remove livestock from Mother Nature, you kind of defy all rules, right? Yeah. We're now not working in Mother Nature's principles. We're now using chemicals, and we're trying to fight biology with chemistry. Good luck. She is always going to win. Mother Nature is smarter than any of us. I'm sorry. We cannot fight biology with chemistry. So, like, of course they're going to get sick. But why are we still playing this same story over and over and over again? The same thing happened a few years ago, and now we're seeing it decimate. I think 145 million chickens have been killed. What if the testing led to false positives? What if we euthanized barns because of a false positive test? Like, these are serious questions about animal husbandry, what it means to be like humane, and also when you think about how your health would be impacted in a living situation like that, it's also like, well, duh, the chickens are going to get sick. If one little bug gets in there, they're drinking antibiotics. Yeah. They don't have an immune system. And that's why they have these extreme biosecurity measures where you have to wear hazmat suits and spray your tires down with toxic chemicals to get rid of all microbes. You can't run from Mother Nature. You can't. Yeah. We can't live in labs with clean everything. It's just not how it works, right? And so when this goes back to human health too, when you live a little bit more aligned with, the seasons and the patterns of the sun, you're a little bit more healthier too. Well, livestock.
Yeah.
Our cows, I'm looking at them right now. They ground every night. They are touching the soil. They're grounding. They they're able to see the sunrise and see the sunset. They have fresh air and, clean living spaces. Now, in a feedlot where they're crushed together, of course they have to rely on pharmaceuticals to remain healthy. Yeah. It's a completely different way of farming. And guys, it's all new. Like, in the grand scheme of humans, this confinement feeding operation is new, and it doesn't work. I'm sorry. It doesn't work. We see the food system get decimated in a span of a week. Hello, USDA, it doesn't work. And I don't know what it's going to take for them to realize it. But now they're, investigating the next round of mRNA vaccines to fight off the bird flu, or, looking into this new round of antibiotics. Well, antibiotic resistance is becoming a huge problem. But guess what? This new development of a new vaccine, this new development of a mRNA vaccine, this new development of a new antibiotic, that's very profitable for Big Pharma. Big Pharma in the livestock industry is almost as big as Big Pharma in the human industry. Follow the money. And I think understanding this is all relatively new is a good thing for people to realize, but we've all been born into it, so we don't know anything else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I semi-regularly post this meme of a scientist looking in a microscope, and he's looking at the bird flu, and he's like, "Ah, yes, I see what this is," and it's a huge stack of cash.
Yes,
And it's
yes.
like,
That's all that it is.
it's just, it's infuriating, is what it is, because at first principles, just like you were saying, if we actually put animals back on land and let them live naturally, we wouldn't even need to be talking about mRNA vaccines for livestock. The only reason we even need antibiotic enriched feeds or waters is because we've moved away from nature. So the answers are already there. The solutions we're looking for
Yeah.
are to problems that we've created in apparently in the quest for progress, which is just ass backwards, because in complex systems, which feeding billions of people is a very complex problem to solve, but like the answers are actually in front of us, but we've become too smart for our own good, and now it just seems like the ignorance to this is just downright stupid.
So I honestly think that it is when you take a step back and you start to see like where all these like investor money, all this investor money is going towards. Did you see there's lab made milk?
I
And it's
didn't,
like,
but yum.
um, okay, imagine if those investment funds were just put towards implementing more regenerative farming systems
Hmm.
or pasture based systems, right? Like, I think that unfortunately, capitalistic mindsets and big companies like greed, they realize that there's more money in intellectual property than there is in real food. And
Hmm.
uh your farmer, myself, other co-ops, they didn't go into this to become really rich. If you wanted to be rich, go make lab made milk, because then you can develop a patent, intellectual property, you can upcharge quite a bit, and it's like this new thing, because that type of thinking of, hey, I can solve, climate change problems or whatever in a lab with lab made milk, that still is this mindset of, I am smarter than Mother Nature, I can
Yeah.
operate
Yeah.
outside of her laws. No,
Yeah.
like, we're not smarter. There are consequences to these decisions. And I think that there are just, unfortunately, two different mindsets of
Hmm.
like, you know, I think that all human problems can be solved through lab and chemistry. And then another group of mindset that I would think that you and I are in, and many of your listeners are like, returning to basic Mother Nature principles, being more connected with what it means to be human, what we're designed to eat. It's two completely different ways of thinking, two completely different ways of producing food, two completely different ways of living. And it's bizarre to like be on one side and looking at the other and being like, you're insane.
Yeah.
And then I'm sure this side's like, you're even more insane. You're a quack and a cuckoo and a hippie.
Yeah.
So it's just it'll be interesting, but like we've said from the beginning, voting with your dollar kind of determines like what path is going to have the resources and the financial tools to continue moving forward.
Hmm. Yeah, it is literally two different worlds, and I think well-intentioned people well-intentioned people are getting duped by the scientific neocon centralized food model, because it, at the surface level at least, it seems to scratch the itch at a solution, because a lot of the things that you just said about these awful confined feeding operations, like chicken and cow just crammed on top of each other, knee deep in their own poop, never seeing the sunlight, nobody wants to support that. And this is where you can overlay something like a vegan argument really well, right? Well,
Yeah.
don't contribute to that level of suffering. We can make this stuff in a lab. There's no suffering now. But again, you're bypassing all of the other inputs, and you're not asking the question of, well, where does this come from? Let alone the nutritional understandings and underpinnings that we know, which is, again, complex systems, there's trade-offs. You remove animal nutrition from a diet and you're going to have some health complications. And you can talk all day about creating that in a lab to reduce suffering, but the answer is just putting animals back on the land the way they've always been, and going back to the wisdom of Mother Nature that we seem to think we're so much smarter than. So there's a lot of chicanery, and there's a lot of bait and switching going on. And another thing, and this is probably the last topic we'll have a chance to get into today, but I really want to get your take on this because I think it's interesting. Another thing that people seem to be getting duped by is organic. Like, you've recently had a video go pop off, as they say, on YouTube, and you was basically like, is organic a scam, the USDA version of it at least. Say more.
Whew, okay, so again, how did we get to this place where we can put all trust and faith in a label made by a government agency? Guys, question it, right? Organic, the concept of it started with great intentions. Unfortunately, corporate came a hold of it and took it to a different path. And of course, there are benefits to, proper organic systems. They can't use glyphosate, heavy pesticides. That's reducing everyone's exposure to those in the environment that is now unfortunately ubiquitous across the country. There are definitely benefits. However, there are so many loopholes in that because it's this like government regulated thing. And guys, we can't just have blind faith in these arbitrary labels. People go to the grocery store and think that pasture raised is great. No, someone just tweeted the other day, like, I don't remember what brand it was, but like on the pasture raised egg carton, you can scan the USDA code and then it takes them to the Google map. And then the Google map is a top down view of a barn.
Of course.
Pasture raised is not regulated. Or it's not like, there's no like, people just view these terms as organic, pasture raised as like these buzzwords, and then you can just arbitrarily trust it. Knowing the farmer, the source is always the best way.
Mm-hmm.
So with organic, there's this unfortunate thing where they can source food from other countries. And then that's brought over as organic. And the problem there is, okay, who's actually regulating overseas? Seriously, who's going to Turkey and regulating what if their standards are different?
Yeah.
Those imports are coming in at such a low cost. So you have to wonder. And then what that's doing is that's undercutting American farmers who are trying their best, but they're actually doing some USDA organic stuff or proper organic practices, but they can't compete with those costs. So what do you think they're going to do? They have to make the best decision for them and their family and continue to be able to pay their bills to turn the lights on. So it's unfortunately becoming a like price cutting race, and all of these big food corporations are joining this organic movement because they're realizing how popular it's getting, and they're finding the loopholes.
Of course.
So when in doubt, I would say that if you can't find a local source for like, produce, buying like the Dirty Dozen, the environmental working group Dirty Dozen as USDA organic would probably be like a safe bet. But don't just blindly buy organic just because. Always question things, always dig deeper, because USDA organic eggs can still come from a confinement barn.
Yeah.
USDA milk or USDA organic milk can still come from a feedlot. USDA organic chicken still fed from confinement lot, fed organic corn and organic soybeans, which contain the same amount of linoleic acid as non-organic corn and non-organic soybeans, right? It's a good step in the right direction because of less pesticides, but regenerative, knowing your farmer, supporting your farmer, like that is just a step above and beyond. And that to me is the most resilient system moving forward, because in organic crop production, because you can't use pesticides, they often rely heavily on like big tillage, heavy tillage, which essentially is these big blades on the tractor that go in and like go a few feet down below and can destroy these wonderful networks, soil networks. It's like a soil internet down there. And if you destroy these root systems, we're not necessarily contributing to improve soil health and making a resilient food system 50 years from now. Yeah. With regenerative systems, you're working a little bit more with Mother Nature and working with her. At the end of the day, like I've said, we are not smarter than her, and we will never fully understand Mother Nature. But the whole goal with regenerative agriculture and even like pro-metabolic and human nutrition is we are never going to fully understand the human body. It's amazing, right? The gut microbiome, so complex. We will never fully understand the gut, but what we can do is give the body and give soil and the environment the tools that it needs. And then Mother Nature will like go and do its thing, because in Mother Nature, 1 + 1 doesn't always equals 2. There's synergy. 1 + 1 can equal 1,000, right? And so we're giving the tools that nature can then take and thrive on. So organic is a difficult topic,
Yeah.
but I wouldn't just blindly say like it's the better option, unfortunately. And so what would be the worst situation would be someone goes to the grocery store and looks at like an organic egg versus a non-organic egg and go with the organic egg when it could be double the cost, and instead they could have bought better eggs from a
Right.
local farmer.
Right.
So they're spending money, higher priced items that may not be the best option.
Yeah.
Question things.
Yeah.
Dig deeper.
Tons of greenwashing around food, and
Yeah.
like you said, organic, the intention of it started really well, but now it's been captured. It's
Yeah.
At best maybe slightly less poisonous,
Yeah.
which is good because slightly less poison is a good thing, but there is probably a much healthier alternative that doesn't have a USDA label anywhere near it because it's found at your farmer's market, and those people aren't going and out there and seeking that validation or that stamp. But you bet your ass they're beyond organic. They're regenerative. They're biodynamic. They're taking care of the soils instead of destroying them. They are trying to build resilient systems instead of extractive ones. So I think that was a really good point. Don't just automatically jump to organic because it's quote unquote better, because it is going to increase the price, and that there's probably a cheaper, if not like at least competitive price thing at your Sunday local farmers market, or even get creative. That is one of the beautiful things about the modern world, is we can get online, we can find these things too. So where there's a will, there is a way. And I think the importance of these kinds of conversations puts the onus back on us to try and go that extra mile to do that.
And I just want to reiterate this point. I don't think that it is the role of the consumer to have a PhD in understanding labels.
Right.
I don't think that that's how it should be. And that is honestly one of the reasons why I'm so passionate in building Nourish and Angel Acres, because I am building a food system that I trust with every ounce of me, with inputs on how all the food is produced. And I think that there should be these like food clubs or buyer clubs where a customer can join and have more faith that everything in that food system is vetted for them. Because I know, you're busy. You got kids. You've got all of these commitments in your life. Your job is really exhausting. And now you have to go and like understand what all these labels mean at the grocery store. It shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't. And so I understand the frustration. The modern world makes things challenging, but there are people like me, other buyer clubs throughout the country, that we are trying to build something where you can shop with confidence and not have to be, like we said in the beginning, we all have certain amount of energy reserves, right?
Yeah.
Pulling a bunch of energy of trying to understand what this label means, this word means, this label, all of this. Like at the end of the day, you just want to buy food that supports your health and your family's health. And it's unfortunately hard to do that today.
Yeah.
And that, I'm sorry, like we all face that and it sucks.
Yeah.
But when you can, supporting these better systems, it will become easier and easier and easier over time to access them.
That's right. Well said. And the only way we're going to get back to that, if we ever get back to that in one way, shape, or form, is by supporting these systems. Because I would love to say we can wave a magic wand one day and not have to worry about labels, but it's so broken right now that it needs a lot of fixing. And the fixing is this intentional consumerism and all of it. So I appreciate all of the topics we got into today, and this what you're doing. It's really, really important, not only empowering people to think about their health so they can get to a level of energy and vibrancy where they can start to think about these other things, but also like actually putting your hands in the dirt, actually raising the animals, actually getting this food on people's plates. It's pretty cool. So keep fighting the good fight, and it's going to be a fight. So keep fighting.
It really, really is. And I think, as like, guys, we're doing it together, right? Like it's not just me, it's not just our group here at Nourish. Like together we're changing the food system, consumers, producers, like together. It's an empowering movement, and I just feel so honored and blessed to be able to be a part of it. It's so fun for me and rewarding. So for anyone that does buy from us right now or will in the future, like I just thank you guys, because you're supporting this new path, and it's fun to be along the journey with you guys.
Yep. Amen to that. Where can people go to keep up to date with what you're into, and keep tabs on what you're doing, and maybe purchase some amazing products? Where would you send them?
Yeah. So Strong Sistas, if you're kind of interested in a little bit more like health stuff, we are Strong Sistas at strong.sistas on most social media platforms. And then our website is armstrongsisters.com. If you want to learn more, we've got a bunch of free stuff there. And then our, right now, working really hard on a new website. So something I don't like to work on is a bunch of tech development, but unfortunately that's needed to create a good user experience. So we're working on a new centralized website, which will house everything. But for now, we're nourishcooperative.com and Angel. Oh gosh, is it Angel Dash Acres? See, this is the confusing thing.
Tech. Yeah, it's tricky. We're out here trying to feed people. We don't want to be doing this website.
Angel-acresfarm.com. So that's where eggs are. And then Nourish is the other one because we started with just eggs and then built like a food system around that and added, beef and sourdough and cheese and stuff like that. So that's our little Strong Sisters and Nourish food hub there.
Amazing. And we'll get it all linked below as well. So you can click on that and find Ashley online and the Strong Sisters and keep kicking butt, friends. And any closing thoughts?
This is a really fun conversation. I don't get the opportunity to talk about these important topics. And I think they need to happen more and more. So I really appreciate this opportunity. It's been fun.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better. And that's what we're trying to do with this platform as well. Big, important conversations, radical conversations with radical humans. And that's a good way to wrap it. Thank you, Ashley. And thank you, listener. You lot stay radical. And where possible, try to be intentional about voting with your dollar. It's so, so important. And we'll see you next week. Stay healthy, stay strong, stay free. Peace. All right, friends, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Radical Health Radio. We got a fresh new podcast for you every Wednesday. If you enjoyed the show, consider liking, subscribing, reviewing, and rating us on your podcast platform. It helps to spread this message of radical health. We'll see you next week.